I have been requested to speak at conferences for decades now, sometimes private events. So I know a lot of you from these other events, other countries. And I've known you for a long time. And I know many of you are senior developers. You're really good at what you do. And what sets you apart from the junior developer is you know how to do the thing. They don't, you do. So what happens? You're sitting there, you're typing in your editor, and all of a sudden you've forgotten how to do the thing. It's kind of embarrassing. What am I going to do? So you pop over to Stack Overflow and you start looking for it. From those in the future watching this on video, Stack Overflow was one of the first victims of the great AI carnage. So you hop over to Stack Overflow and you're looking for how to do the thing. And it turns out they don't know how to do the thing either. And the answers are all steaming piles of ones and zeros. And you're getting a little bit frustrated, which is perfectly understandable, Stack Overflow. So you hit your favorite search engine and you type in, how do I do the thing? You accidentally click on the first link and it turns out it's a sponsored link where if you give them enough information about your company, they will send you a white paper telling you how not to do the thing, but they'll offer to do the thing for you. Okay, so you're clicking down through the list and it's a whole bunch of SEO driven content and it's absolutely maddening. And about an hour later, you find yourself on some dodgy subreddit reading about the geopolitical implications of illicit diaper production in Southeast Asia. How did you get here? We've all been there. I've been there. You've been there. It's called getting out of the zone. It's very frustrating. A lot of people think getting out of the zone is Ted sticking his head up over the cubicle wall. By the way, Ted is a real person. Ted, if you're watching this, I meant the other Ted. Ted sticking his head up over the cubicle wall and saying, hey, Yuki, I don't remember how to do the thing. How do I do the thing? And Yuki closes her eyes. She takes her fingers away from the keyboard and she briefly fantasizes about smashing the monitor into Ted's face because really, Ted deserves it. And she's out of the zone. But this isn't getting out of the zone. It's not Ted sticking his head over the cubicle wall, which takes you out. It's getting out of the editor. I have a new workflow. I'm typing along, and sometimes I forget how to do the thing. So what do? I just type in a comment explaining what the thing is, or I wait a little bit after I type in a method name. Copilot does its thing, it gives me my thing. Or maybe it's not really my thing, so I play with this thing, and now I have my thing. I move on to the next thing, and I am still in the zone. This is a new world of software development. So, the new AI. This talk is always out of date. And surprisingly enough, aside from the very first talk I gave at OSCON years ago, this is the hardest talk I've ever put together. I have so many trash versions on my hard drive because every time I type a slide, it is obsolete a day or two later. It's very frustrating. My name is Curtis Poe, better known as Ovid to many of you, with allaroundtheworld.fr. My personal website, ovid.github.io, or you can contact me at curtis.poe@gmail.com if you ever want to ask questions. I do want to take the time to thank our sponsors for this event, Perl Services with Renee, who was up here earlier, giving the talk about VS Code, Combo Shop, Cosmo Shop, sorry about that, Otobo, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the German one, my apologies for that, but please find them, thank them, ask them what they do. And for the purposes of this talk, I want to be clear, when I say AI, unless I speak otherwise, I'm referring to large language models primarily dealing with text generation, obviously. AI concerns are extremely valid. I don't have the time to cover them in this talk. Bias, the environmental impact, things like that. I would like to talk about them. I have 40 minutes. And full disclosure, I get Copilot for free because of my open source work. I'll be mostly talking about Copilot and ChatGPT, but there's a lot of other alternatives out there. So be aware of that. But using AI to code, this is what a lot of people want to know. Now, Renee covered this earlier, and that is very good because I could give an hour-long talk on using AI to code, but I wanted to talk about a lot more, and I actually couldn't do a lightning talk on using AI to code because there's too much to talk about. So I'm just going to say this. Learn prompt engineering. Oh, for the love of God. Learn prompt engineering. There's a lot more involved than what you think. And what's really interesting, it is not a science, it is an alchemy. It is an alchemy where the rules of the universe are evolving every single day. What worked yesterday doesn't necessarily work today. It's not necessarily going to work in this other LLM. If you switch from ChatGPT to Claude to Gemini to Mistral, you're going to get different results all over the place. But you need to learn prompt engineering or else you're going to have disappointing results. We'll touch on some of this later. The key thing to remember when you're doing programming with AI is you generate something, you review it, you test it, and you go back to step 10. It's just like regular programming to a certain extent. You need to remember small incremental bits of work. When people say, I generated all this code with AI and it doesn't work, well, all this code is kind of a hint that maybe something was not appropriate there. There's a lot more I could say on this, but there is one benefit all of you have. Once you get used to prompt engineering and how this works, refine, iterate, it starts to feel an awful lot like software engineering, what we do every day. All of you have the skills necessary to transition into this new world. So that's great news. But that's all I've got to say about that. Where are we now? 2017, this is what really kicked this off when Google researchers released a paper entitled "Attention is All You Need." It made it much, much easier to train these huge, large language models. I've got to start the timer, bummer. They can train them in parallel. They're incredibly expensive to compute, obviously. It's getting to the point now where you need something close to nation-state level resources to build any of the large foundational models. It's hard. And they're moderately expensive to actually run, even though the quality of the results is very fascinating with them. But it's not just ChatGPT. If you're not familiar with this, ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and Google's Gemini are the three big players here. We have Llama, Mistral, tons of others. You can go out to Hugging Face if you're not familiar with that. It's kind of like GitHub for large language models. And it's going to look strange if it's a new world for you. But the top three are so dominant right now. Many people are saying if you're trying to build a foundational model, that's just an extended technical interview for getting a job with the top three at this point. They're solid. Also, check out Poe.com. Has nothing to do with me. It's coincidence. They aggregate a lot of these great AI tools. So right now, you can't use Anthropic's Claude in Europe. Just go to Poe and use it anyway. And here's some of the things you can do with this. So I released Reason on the ChatGPT store. You have to have a paid account for that. I apologize. So you go out to a website and you read some inflammatory posts, someone writing something stupid about, I don't know, the geopolitical implications of illicit diaper production in Southeast Asia, and you horribly are offended by what they wrote. You just drop it in there, and it gives you a summary of what the piece is, an analysis of the factual accuracy, the logical flaws in there, whether or not it was a good argument, suggestions for improvement to the argument, and if there's counter arguments. It is amazing what can be done with this. And if you look at how it's changing, I upgrade my laptop, my software is faster. I upgrade my LLM, my software is smarter. It develops new capabilities. We've never seen anything like this before. And in fact, when ChatGPT was first released, it was text only. And what happened? Now you can drop in images. Image I created a long time ago, and it actually has a summary of the argument that I was trying to present, and it handles that flawlessly. You can't write software like this with traditional techniques. This only took me a few minutes to put, longer than that. I had to keep tweaking the prompts to get it to come out right, but it wasn't hard. You can't write software which does this. And it really is providing value to the company. But the thing was, I was a naysayer. If you've seen any of my previous talks, you know that I often bring up that when there's a controversial or complicated situation, avoid people who hit the extremes. People use words like always and never. They're very dangerous because they back themselves into an ideological corner, which is hard to get out of. And that's what I did. I was a naysayer. I've worked with AI before. AI can never do what I do. It can never figure out the complicated business interaction. Blah, blah. What the hell was I talking about? I was there. So why aren't I? First of all, AI is not coming. AI is already here, and it's providing real value to businesses all over the place. In many ways, I don't have time to discuss in this talk. But unfortunately, the loudest voices that we have in this debate, if you get outside of the depths of AI and you're just reading clickbait headline titles, the loudest voices are the accelerationists on the top who are saying, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And then you got the naysayers at the bottom saying, it's only torpedoes ahead, dude. And the voices in the middle, the moderates, you can't even read that. They get lost in the newspaper debate. Inside, the debate is much more nuanced. And if you don't dig in, you don't get to know the AI community, you're going to lose a lot of that. But what that means is if you're not really digging in, you're only hearing the extremist views, and it's going to be very hard for you to get effective views of your own. It's very hard to have a conversation if that's where we are. So my background, two of my least popular open source models. One, I wrote AI Prolog, which is a Prolog interpreter in Perl. AI Neural Net Simple, which is something called a feed-forward backpropagation neural network written in C. I've got a Perl interface on top, and nobody cares. Though the second one, I know a guy was using that for his dissertation to try and generate music. Past year, I've been doing a deep dive into generative AI, doing a lot of work with that, doing some work fine-tuning Mistral for creating AI chatbots, building ChatGPT storebots, as you saw. And one of my first projects using the new AI for coding was OpenSky. OpenSky provides free data about where flights are going, useful for all sorts of interesting stuff, including assessing the impact of climate change from all the flights. And there wasn't a Perl module for that. So I would take the Python code and I would paste it in as a comment to my Perl code, and boom, Copilot would spit out Perl code for me. And after the first couple of iterations, when it understood the context, the code is always working perfectly the first time. And this was months ago when everyone was saying how rubbish it was, but it has enough context for the right problems. It does a great job. Just last week, I was fixing an XS module for a client. I haven't done C programming in 20 years. I don't know the Perl internals, and I assumed that Copilot wouldn't have enough information out there to work with this. And it gave me the solution correctly the first time. Wow. But this is what blew my mind. I was working for a client and I was building something called an immutable ORM. And because of some legacy problems I had to use metaprogramming to build this at runtime when the software first loaded. Very complex. And I paused a moment and Copilot suggested this comment: do not install methods which already exist. And I laughed because Copilot's hallucinating. Yes, you're going to have problems like that. And then I reread my code. And I reread that comment. I had introduced a very subtle bug in the code, which my test did not catch. Very hard to detect in production, that Copilot saw. It understood the code better than I did. And this was code I was writing right now. That stuck with me for a long time. And then last Halloween, this thread dropped on Twitter. Jabalopin on Twitter, he does a lot of work with prompt engineering. He decided he was going to recreate Angry Birds with pumpkins for Halloween. And in less than a day, he wrote no code, none. He just used AI tools. He recreated all of the mechanics of Angry Birds, one person, in less than a day. He didn't create the levels, but the mechanics. You can go out there and play it on the web right now. The Angry Birds team took them 9 months. Do the math. And I said, okay, it's my turn. I don't want a game. I don't want a toy project. I want something I actually need. Can I do this? This was my really big turning point. I want to know if I can do this. And I want to use technologies I haven't used before. How far can I push this envelope? And I thought about it for a while, and then I realized I use the Notes app on my phone to do shopping. And Notes app is great for notes. It's not great for list management. It's terrible. I'm always getting duplicate items. I can't find the items that I want. And so there's my prompt. I would like to create a small shopping list app in Swift for the iPhone. If you give a prompt like that to an AI, its response should be, how cute, good luck. Because that's not a prompt. That was my prompt. Today, I would have I would refine this prompt even further, but prompts, I was using ChatGPT. This is where you use a top-down style of programming, which I won't go into right now. If you want, you can go out to ovid.github.io. On the left-hand side, scroll down, click on the artificial intelligence link. I've got some articles there. You can find the article where I detail my entire process, and I also link to a Google Doc transcript where I have my entire transcript going through of how I built this app right there, which is running on my phone right now. I use shopping every time I go shopping. It's really made my life easier. And it took me 2 hours. I don't know iOS. I don't know Swift. I don't know Xcode. This wasn't weeks of training. I just did it. I've done a little bit of Kotlin development with Android for their phones, but that's it. I had no background here. And if you've played with these technologies, you know they can get really complex. Why did it take me 2 hours? Because it was the first time I'd ever done it. I could do it faster today. And I didn't have to pay to remove ads from the app I built. I didn't have to ask my app not to track. I looked online for other shopping apps. Maybe I could just find one. And they have things like share your shopping list with your friends. I don't need that. I have an app. It's on my phone right now. Life is so much easier. But we know how software works. In software, you get something new and we struggle with it for a while. Like the early days of Java development, they were constantly using exceptions for flow control. And after a while, people realized that's a bad idea. We still do that all over the place, but it's a bad idea. You don't want to do that. So best practices form. From best practices, we start developing design patterns, and design patterns often turn into frameworks. So this is what I expect to be the future of AI, except that's out of date. But this is happening right now. AutoGPT was one of the first, but ChatDev is one you may have heard of if you've paid attention to. This has been out for a while. It's on GitHub. They've simulated a whole bunch of roles. They're using what are called AI agents who can interact with one another. They simulate a whole bunch of roles within a software development company. They left out human resources, just an oversight, I'm sure. And you give it a human natural language prompt, build me an e-reader, and you get working software. Sometimes. And it's not complex working software, and it's junior dev quality software. It's stuff, if you want to play around and then tinker with it, you need to clean it up. But it works, just from a human language prompt. Sometimes works. There's Magic Dev. 5 million token context window, oh my goodness. Their intention is they want to give you a coworker, not a co-pilot. So someone from customer support gets an angry phone call, eventually contacts Magic System and says, hey, this report, that column should be sorted alphabetically, not numerically. So the Magic System is going to, the intent is that it's going to look at that and it's going to say, oh, it's going to write the code to change the sorting. It's going to write the test to verify the code was correct. It's going to write the comments. It's going to submit a pull request. The customer support person, quite often that's AI. So from the point of a customer calling all the way down to the pull request might have no humans involved. Then there's Lovable, another company. By the way, these companies are raking in millions in funding because they've been doing some amazing work. Lovable, they build themselves as the last piece of software. And I'm going to stop and say, from a marketing perspective, why did you guys do that? Just call yourselves the last software. That would have been so much better. Lovable, if you're watching this, you could steal that line. It's free. Their intent is it's software which will write all of your other software for you. I don't have time. Ask me afterwards. They're not going to get there. I don't think any of these guys are going to get there yet, but this is the beginning, and it's interesting. There's Devin from Cognition Labs. This one's been making all the rounds lately inside the AI community. Really amazing stuff. Brilliant people behind this. So the UI they have is fascinating. So the CEO gives a demo of the UI and tells Devin to do the thing. And Devin doesn't know how to do the thing. So in one of the windows, Devin is going out and reading the API documentation for how to make this stuff happen, and then writing the software in another window, and then the software doesn't work. What did Devin do? Devin stopped, put in some print debugging statements in the software, reran it, read the output of the debugging statements, used that to fix the code, and continued and had working software. That might be a bit creepy for some folks, but it's really amazing what they can do. Oh, here's 3D GPT. Natural language instructions goes all the way down to the pipeline to create a 3D model you can import into Blender. They've got an archive preprint paper, GitHub repo, only in the beginning. This is for like video games and stuff. Humans didn't create that scene, so we can see whole art departments getting wiped out by this in all sorts of industries. But what does this mean? What are the implications? That's what people are wondering about. So short term, what we found over and over is that lesser skilled people benefit more. Senior people, like us, we still benefit, but not as much as lesser skilled people. There's probably going to be a correction in the pay gap. Over the past 20 years or so, senior developers have been getting a lot more money than junior developers. So we don't know. Are junior developers going to be more productive and therefore they're going to get paid more? Or are senior developers going to be seen as less valuable? They're going to get paid less? There's probably going to be a correction there, but we don't know what the economic impact is going to be. But currently it is augmenting us. It is not replacing us. But that brings us to jobs. That's what everyone's wondering about. So Stack Overflow, I mentioned we're coming back to them. They had, last year, they announced they were laying off 28% of their staff. They didn't say why. Everyone else said why. AI. Because it is so much faster and easier to get a good answer off a lot of these chat systems, these AI models. And they're much faster and they're getting better all the time. Google, they used AI to automate a whole bunch of their ad pipeline so they could fire a whole bunch of other Googlers. Survey. This is a survey late last year. 44% of companies say that AI is likely to replace employees next year. That's this year now. MIT study saying not so fast. And then there's this interesting one. Person analyzed 5 million freelancing jobs on Upwork. If you're not familiar with Upwork, I'll skip a whole bunch of stuff. Let's say for many people, I don't have a lot of money. I'm not so worried about quality. I'm going to hire a person for a one-off on Upwork. Don't have a lot of money. They're not as worried about quality. So what do we see? We see a lot of jobs such as writing, social media marketing, customer service translation. Those are disappearing off Upwork in large numbers because you don't care. Okay, writing. I get some writing back and it's not perfect. Well, I get the writing now. And it costs me virtually nothing and I can finish off the rest. A lot of other jobs, graphics design, web development, video editing and production. AI can augment those too, but I don't have the skills to finish the polishing on a lot of those. So those jobs are increasing. So instead of seeing a market collapse, we're seeing a market transformation. So right now we know 1 in 5 jobs, mental labor, definitely high risk of exposure. Manual labor, much less risk of exposure. I'm not going to have a robot cutting my hair anytime soon. If you want to, that's whatever makes your socks roll up and down. But currently, we're not seeing the labor market collapsing. We're seeing it transforming. What does that mean for the future? No one can say. But remember, for the AI programmers, if you're going to work with this and you're going to have them do work for you, think of them as junior developers. I mean, sometimes worse than the people who come out of those short boot camps. Junior developers come out and they need care and maintenance. You got to point them in the right direction. You got to tell them when they screwed up. Sometimes you got to polish their code and don't have them, do the big system design. You've got to learn what you can do and what they can do. So consider them junior developers, and they're not going to replace us for X number of years. Everyone wants to know what X is. A lot of the people deep within these fields are arguing about this. We don't know. The numbers are all over the place. I hear 10 years, a common number being bandied about, but it's not going to replace all jobs for various reasons I won't go into right now. I am kind of concerned about unemployment. I want uni to be an economist originally. There's all sorts of different types of unemployment. Most people, when they think about unemployment, they're thinking of what's called frictional unemployment. I lost my job. I got to get a new job. I'm unemployed. I'm worried about something called structural unemployment. That's where the jobs are available. People don't have the skills to fill them. So what happened, with the web growing so fast, we had all these boot camps churning out people. Sometimes they were great developers. Sometimes they cost more money than they were worth. With AI, I expect we are going to have some structural unemployment problems, and there's going to be more and more AI boot camps out there, and they're going to be churning out these substandard people for developing AI, which is going to be a problem. But we cannot stop this. If you can figure out a way to stop it, let me know. So we have to adjust it. It's like if you don't like the tide coming in, you can't shovel it back with a fork. It ain't going to happen. That's not an endorsement of, or not. I'm just saying that's the reality. But a lot of companies need to consider what's going to happen with adopting AI. And I like to look at it at 3 levels from what I see. You have transformational, strategic, and tactical. Just a quick review. You have a goal of the company. The strategy is the plan to achieve the goal. The tactics are the individual steps you take to implement the strategy. So going all the way down. So transformational. You have companies like Rabbit, Humane, Cognition Labs, etc. These are companies building brand new technologies, brand new markets and products for those markets which could not exist prior to the new AI. Don't try it. Most of these companies are going to go out of business. The few who remain are going to make a fortune. Strategic. So this is where you start supporting the goals of the company directly with AI. It does require some more AI knowledge. I know MIT Sloan School of Management actually offers a course for CFOs to work with CIOs to implement the AI strategy for the company or getting a good strategic overview. You have to be careful if on this side your AI is customer facing. There's a lot of danger with that. So you need to be aware of that. Like recently, a woman on a lottery website, she was a winner. She uploaded her photo. They were going to show her in a tropical setting, and they used AI to do that, and they showed her topless. Lots of problems with AI. Tactical. This is where you've got existing companies and they're going to use this to just augment people's abilities. This needs to come with a top-down mandate from management, but a bottom-up implementation from the teams, because all the teams are going to use this differently. They're going to experiment, and we don't always know the best practices. Except it does offer great power, which I wish I had more time to go into, but I did not. This doesn't require a lot of expertise, which is a great thing. And I consider it low risk, medium reward. But how are you going to implement it? What's best for you? Transformational, strategic, tactical. How well do you know AI? What's your risk tolerance? The one thing to remember, think about how many companies went out of business because they didn't adapt to the web. Very large companies. I'm sure all of you could name some. When something this transformational comes this quickly, and this is being described as exponential growth, what happens is you arrive too early or too late. That's what's happening right now. I highly recommend the AI Breakdown by Nathaniel Whitmore. You can just search for that in Google. This is a daily podcast. I have no association with them, by the way. This is a daily podcast, usually about 10 to 15 minutes. The first few minutes are just a summary of the headlines for the past day or past couple of days. And then he usually has a breakdown, a deeper coverage of a particular topic. Very quick, very easy. Really helps to get you up to speed on the basics of what's happening in the AI industry today. It's absolutely amazing. And I just saw this. They just released something called Super Intelligent. I'm not endorsing this. You can go out to bsuper.ai. I haven't signed up, but Nathaniel Whitmore mentioned something interesting about AI training today. First of all, you have to wade through a ton of material before you actually get something practical hands-on, which can be very frustrating, isn't always necessary. Two, tons of these tutorials, of which I've taken many, are horribly out of date, which I have hated. And this is what he directly is trying to address with bSuper AI. He's got like 300 videos. Most of them are just a few minutes long, and they have hands-on exercises, so you can get in there and learn what's actually going on. This has just been released. I'm impressed with what I listened to from the AI Breakdown, so I felt comfortable enough to put it here. And how much time do I have left? Excellent. I hid so many slides because this could have been like a 3 or 4 hour talk. There was a point where I was going down the accelerationist rabbit hole and had so many slides on that. That would have been bad. Do we have questions?
Engineering thing, because if you're thinking about with the term prompt engineering, we're thinking about like long process, but when we start learning, we will be learning obsolete.
Okay. The question is, how should we approach the idea of learning prompt engineering, particularly since it's evolving so fast, we learn something that's going to be obsolete. Everyone's dealing with this. So no one's going to be surprised that this beautiful jailbreak prompt that you had created a couple of months ago doesn't work anymore. That's not the problem. It's the general process of how you do this. It's going to vary. So quite often, there's a number of prompt engineering frameworks out there, actually, like RACEF, APE, others. They always have horrible acronyms. So quite often, you start out telling the prompt, the AI, you are an expert logician teaching at one of the finest universities in, Europe or whatever, which sounds odd, but you need to set it up so it understands the context and how it's going to respond. Then you tell it what you want it to do. You might give it some examples of what the output's going to do. You might tell it who its audience is. And this will vary depending upon the task that you have. The basic structure is there. Once you get past the basic structure, then you start to learn all sorts of little tips, like let's think step by step, which happens to tremendously increase the factual accuracy of complex logical problems. You start learning things about using uppercase, saying do not in uppercase, do X, Y, and Z. And it actually understands that means emphasis. You start to learn how they think, for lack of a better term. You just have to dig in there to start learning this. I might add, as a side note, I was out there checking. I have seen in the United States just now, for one insurance company, mid-level, they're asking for mid-level prompt engineers, people who've been doing it for a while. You're just beyond the basics. And their salary range for this position is $175,000 a year to $225,000 a year for a mid-level role. This is more serious than people think. I think actually it might have been remote. I can't recall. There are definitely remote positions out there available for this. Anyone else have questions?
Actually, that's just how we do it. I mean, hopefully from the beginning, figuring out like defining the roles, for the model to take step by step. Visually, then the model turns to take intuition, but make more reasonable conclusions. And just to append your experiment, I would say that my colleague last week he created this custom link layer for iOS, also using ChatGPT.
Okay, we've got to keep that short because the mic can't pick you up. I apologize. So, okay, Andre was explaining some of the benefits and some of the approaches for, doing this, but I can't repeat all of that right now. Yes, you have a question. I know. My talk originally came in at like an hour and a half. You can't imagine how much I've pared it down, and I apologize. Speaking fast is something I tend to do anyway, and it's very unfortunate. Oh, the question was, are your slides online? You're speaking very fast. Yes, I tend to speak fast, and it's very unfortunate when I'm coming into a country where English is not the native language, because it does cause some people to struggle, and I apologize. I need to clean up a couple of things and then upload this to SlideShare or something like that so that people can have access to it. Also, you can contact me and say, you can email me, say, hey, can I have the slides? Yeah, sure. That won't be a problem before I get a SlideShare, or just if you want to contact me, ask me questions, in case you want to know how stuff goes. Yes.
How you can trust the AI-generated software if you don't know that knowledge about language?
How can you trust the AI-generated content if you don't have knowledge of the language? So, in which context? Are we talking about translating from, say, French to Russian or Perl like code? I'm sorry.
The Swift code, is there a vector in Swift code or not?
Uh,
How do you know about
Okay, so that's vague, but that's okay. Oh, how can you trust the output of the AI? More or less is what he said, but he covered a number of nuanced things. Thank you, Nick. So the Swift code, for example, how did I trust the output of the AI? As I was generating this, I discovered why they call it mansplaining as a service, because there were definitely times where I was saying, okay, I needed to do this. Why isn't it doing this? Why isn't it doing the thing? And it said, oh, it's doing the thing. This is exactly what you want. And it's, no, this is not what I want. This code does not work. And it was coming back to me. This code does exactly what you want. And then, ironically, I hit Stack Overflow, and they gave me the correct answer. So Stack Overflow isn't dead yet. They're not going down without a fight. For other things, you're touching on that touches on so many different topics, but one of them is dealing with the problem of hallucinations. For hallucinations, part of what helps to deal with them is you've got two kinds of hallucinations. One, because it's a statistical model, it'll sometimes just spit out bad information. And depending upon the depth of the model, the complexity, the size, it might spit out, if it's too small, it might be spitting out even worse information. The other problem is losing context. It forgets part of the conversation, which is relevant to what's happening now. Those are the two main types of hallucinations. Both of them are being dealt with. Like the new Google Gemini Pro, I think, has over 1 million tokens of context. Just to give you an idea what a token means in this sense, thank you. Think of that as like 75%. Take 75% of that, that's the number of words. So it's about 750,000 words. A typical novel is between 200,000 to 300,000 words. So it's like 2 novels worth of info. You're not going to lose that information. So the context is helpful. Google also has done, they just a few days ago dropped a paper where they can give effectively infinite context size to these models, which means one of the other major sources of hallucinations goes. And they have another paper where they use something similar to what's called retrieval augmented generation. They call back into the Google API to get to verify whether or not facts are true. And at that point, for longer factual documents, they were actually able to outperform humans in producing factually accurate documents. So we are getting better at that. Anytime we think it's a problem, an entrepreneur says, that's an opportunity. And they have been all over this, and they're doing great work. Yes?
If I use AI for creating software, not only creating software, but they work for a company and use AI to write the software and to maintain the software. There's a high chance that intellectual property of the company and secrets of the company will still.
Okay, wait. I think we've got about a minute left, so I need to cut you off there. What you're asking is, you're talking about the maintainability of software that is generated by AI and whether or not that information is going to spill out elsewhere. So there's a variety of ways you can approach that. First of all, many times corporate accounts they're promising as part of the license agreement that they will not retain or train with your data. Or you can go to Hugging Face. You can run your own large language models on your own servers, and no one's ever going to see it. So there's less concern about that. There's a variety of ways you can deal with that. As for maintainability, this is one of the biggest problems. These are junior devs. You do not want junior devs to be building enterprise class systems because they're going to be unmaintainable messes. So you treat them as junior devs, and you have to make sure that they produce working code. You make sure it's maintainable. Even with the Swift app that I wrote for my phone, it had some maintainability problems, which I had to manually correct later on. That being said, in the future, when it gets to the point where they can build entire large systems themselves, a lot of the things that we do, layering, proper naming, separation of concerns, that actually doesn't make the software better. That's all for humans to be able to maintain it better. AI doesn't need that. So if humans ever get taken out of the loop, software development could be radically, radically different. Are we done? Okay. What's that? Okay. One last question, quick? No! I had one feeling and you heard it. No. Thank you, folks, very much. I had a blast. I hope it helped.